It's 8:52 here in New York. I'm Bryant Gumbel. We understand that there has been a plane crash on the southern tip of Manhattan. You're looking at the World Trade Center. We understand that a plane has crashed into the World Trade Center. We don't know anything more than that. We don't know if it was a commercial aircraft. We don't know if it was a private aircraft. We have no idea how many were on board or what the extent of the injuries are right now. We have, I understand, an eyewitness on the phone right now. Sir, good morning. This is Bryant Gumbel. Could you give us your name?
Yeah, my name is Stuart.
Stuart, where are you right now?
I'm working at a restaurant in Soho.
All right, so tell us what you saw, if you would.
I was waiting at a table and I literally saw it seemed to be like a small plane. I just heard a couple noises. It looked like it bounced off the building, and then I just saw a huge ball of fire on top, and then the smoke seemed to simmer down. And it just, a lot of smoke was coming out, and that's pretty much the extent of what I saw.
A private aircraft?
I'm not sure if it was it just seemed like a smaller plane. I don't think it was anything commercial.
Could you tell us whether or not it was a prop or a jet?
I honestly don't know. It happened too quickly.
Characterize the scene for us down there right now, if you would.
Excuse me?
Can you tell us about the scene down there right now?
Right now, people are just on the street looking at the building. The building, there's just a lot of smoke. It's not too crazy down where I am.
How far away from the World Trade Center specifically are you?
I'm actually on Thompson Street North. I'm not too far.
It's 8:54 right now, Stuart. Can you tell me when this happened exactly?
I would have to say about 10 minutes ago.
About 10 minutes ago?
Yeah.
Is this normally an area that is heavily trafficked by aircraft, or is this an area that aircraft steer pretty clear of?
I really don't know that information.
Is there much panic around there?
Just people on the street coming out looking. There was panic at first, but it seemed to slow down right now. We're
looking at a picture of a great deal of smoke coming out of the building. Can you please tell us, was there, after you heard this crash, was there smoke immediately?
No, there was a big ball of fire on the top of the building, and then as that simmered down, there just seemed to be a ton of smoke. And pretty much immediately.
I hear fire engines in the background. Has that been going since you saw this crash, or is that kind of late arrival?
It happened almost pretty much after we heard the crash.
Almost after you heard the crash.
It was pretty quick when we heard sirens and people acting on it.
Were you looking up as the plane approached the building, or did it only catch your attention after it crashed into the World Trade Center?
I heard a sort of a crashing sound, but I looked up quick enough to actually see something go into the building, but everything happened so fast I wasn't quite sure what I was looking at.
So there's no way you can know whether or not the plane seemed to be in trouble before it crashed into the building?
Oh, no, I couldn't tell.
It's hard for us to tell from the picture we're seeing just how far down from the top that plane crashed. Have you any better eyesight to it from your vantage point?
Not really. All I know is it definitely wasn't the top of the building, because that seems to be intact from what I saw. I really can't tell right now.
Can you tell us anything about how much debris came crashing to the ground, and whether or not anybody was hurt as a result?
I honestly don't know. I just saw a lot of what looked like crumbling glass, maybe just a lot of stuff falling down, but I can't tell you debris-wise.
Obviously, the timing of this is important. It comes before 9 o'clock. Perhaps, and we say that in hopeful fashion, perhaps not everybody was at work, because if that building was in fact crowded with workers, we're looking at probably some casualties and injuries of considerable proportions. But right now there's no way of telling that. Mr. Stewart, just one more time, and I know I'm exhausting what little information you have, but we have people joining us every moment. Take me through again where you were, when this happened, what you saw.
I was serving tables at a restaurant, and I just heard sort of like a boom sound. It almost sounded like an earthquake sound, and I looked up and I saw literally something like, it might have even bounced off a little bit of a building, and next thing I know, I saw a big ball of fire on the top of the building, and just lots of smoke and what looked like to be debris or glass falling down. and it happened really quick. It's really hard to...
Okay. Stuart, I thank you very much. I appreciate that, sir.
Okay, my pleasure.
Thank you.
Okay.
We're on the line with another eyewitness. Sir, this is Bryant Gumbel in New York.
Well, how you doing?
I'm fine, thank you. You're Wendell?
Yes, I am.
Wendell, can you give me your last name?
Klein.
Wendell Klein. Tell me where you are, if you would.
Well, right now I'm back in the hotel. I'm in the hotel offices here, the front office.
You're in the... Okay, where were you when
I was standing right in front of the hotel. I'm the doorman there. And...
The hotel. Which hotel?
Marriott World Trade Center.
Right across from the World Trade Center.
It's actually right in between them.
Right in between the World Trade Center.
Yes.
Okay, so you were standing outside, and tell us what you saw and what you heard.
Well what I heard first, an explosion. And I just figured that it was a plane passing by. Then all of a sudden, stuff just started falling, like bricks and paper and everything. And so I just kind of like ran like inside to get away from the falling debris and glass and so forth. Then... after like everything stopped, because it like was falling in the street and the cars were crashing into each other. And then when it kind of stopped, I heard a guy screaming. And when I looked over, there was this guy that was on fire. So I kind of like ran over, and I tried to like put the fire out on him. And he was like screaming, and I just told him to roll, and he said he can't. And then another guy came over with his bag and kind of like put the flames out on him. So. Right now, he's being taken care of. I just had everyone call the ambulance and stuff so it can help him out. He
caught fire as a result of the falling debris?
Yeah.
How much debris, can you give us an idea of how much came crashing to the ground?
It's just a lot. Bricks, a lot of bricks, a lot of glass. I'm like enough to like damage cars on the street, make cars swerve into each other, that kind of thing.
Any other people on the ground that you saw?
No, just
hurt?
Just him so far.
Tell me about the traffic down in that area, and I'm talking about human traffic.
Human traffic? Well,
at 8:55, which is about the time when this happened, 8:45, 8:55.
Right. On my side, where I'm standing, there's not a whole lot because it's basically right in front of the hotel, so you don't get too much. But you do get enough. You know, get some.
What about traffic in the building? I mean, you work basically between the two towers.
Yes.
Most people arriving for work before or after 9 a.m.?
Before. Basically, in my hotel, I have people who are just leaving and going to meetings. Outside my hotel, I just have people waiting for their cars to take them to their various destinations, that kind of thing.
I hear alarms going off down there. What's happening?
That's our hotel alarm, and basically, I guess that went off automatically. They've evacuated everyone in the hotel and evacuated all employees.
They have evacuated the hotel?
Yes.
Immediately?
Yes.
Can you give me an idea of what the scene is like down there?
What the what is like?
What the scene is like down there at the World Trade Center?
Just people are like crying and panicking, like want to know what's going on. When I came inside, there were a lot of people who wanted to go out to see what was going on, but the security kind of like kept them at bay and kept them inside. Basically, right now, I just still have people going towards the bar area. They're trying to evacuate everyone out of here. That kind of thing. Is
this an area, Mr. Klein, that is normally trafficked by small planes, or is it an area that they're generally steer clear of?
You do get some. I do see some passing. Basically, those planes like I do see passing are like those, like the planes from Washington, D.C. area. Like, so there won't be like huge planes, but you know, big enough.
Are you hearing anything, Wendell, about what kind of a plane it was, or
no.
How many were on board?
No. Basically, all I got was my wife called me. She told me that it was a plane crash, and basically, I really don't know what's going on so far.
Do you know if it was a private aircraft or a commercial plane?
That I don't know.
You don't know?
No, sir.
You're not seeing any evidence of people being carried out of the building yet?
There's a woman that was just carried. I guess she fainted or something, but I don't see any physical injuries to her.
All right. Mr. Klein, thank you very much, sir.
All right. Good talking to you, sir.
I appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
I understand Teresa Renault is with us right now. Ms. Renault, good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
This is Bryant Gumbel. I'm down on 59th and 5th. Where are you?
I am in Chelsea, and we are at 8th and 16th. We are the tallest building in the area, and my window faces south. So it looks directly onto the World Trade Center. And I would say, you know, approximately 10 minutes ago, there was a major explosion from probably, it looks like about the 80th floor. It looks like it's affected probably 4 to 8 floors. Major flames are coming out of the north side and also the east side of the building, yes. and it was very loud explosion followed by flames, and it looks like the building is still on fire on the inside.
Which building are we talking about? The one that's westernmost?
Let's see. Yes, sir.
So it's coming out on the north side and the east side of the building of the westernmost tower.
That's correct.
You're over in Chelsea. Did you hear the explosion from
yes.
your position?
Yes, we did. As a matter of fact, we heard it, and because I was just like standing there pretty much looking out the window, I didn't see what caused it or if there was an impact.
So you have no idea right now?
There's another one. Another plane just hit. Right, oh my God, another plane has just hit. It hit another building, flew right into the middle of it. Explosion. My God, it's right in the middle of the building.
This one into the east tower?
Yes, right in the middle of the building. And right now, that was definitely looked like it was on purpose.
You saw a plane?
Yes, I just saw a plane go into the building.
Why do you say that was definitely on purpose?
Because it just flew straight into it. It didn't look like it was, and it didn't look like a commercial jet. It was a smaller plane. It was definitely a smaller plane.
Can you characterize the scene down there right now for us?
Now, on the...
Yeah, as you can look down to the street?
Yes.
From your vantage point?
On the second building, I think that the further one, the east side, there it looks like it's about, I would say 15 floors lower than the first building, and there's now flames coming out of that building as well. They're both completely on fire.
Now, I'm looking at what was the West Tower, and it looks like the fire on the north side of that tower is a little bit lower, but it looks like it's the same building. You're saying it was the other tower that absorbed this second impact?
That's what it looks like, exactly, from my perspective.
Don King, our director, if I could ask you to widen out and give us a shot of both towers, because we can't tell from this vantage point. Oh, okay, that is on the second tower.
Yes.
It is on the east tower. Teresa, hang on with us 1 second. We're gonna re-rack the tape of when we were talking to you to see if we can tell.
Okay.
We can't see anything. We can't see a second plane in the picture. There we see the explosion.
Yes.
There we see the explosion.
Plane that hit it.
Here we are. We're trying to re-rack the tape right now. Teresa, do you have a vantage point to the ground from where you are?
Yes, I probably could go down.
No, I'm not asking you to go down. I'm
Okay.
asking if you can see it.
Oh, no, I cannot see the ground, as a matter of fact. There's too many buildings in the way. I can probably see just up about, I would say, up a third of, I can see the top two-thirds of the building.
Uh-huh. And how much of that top two-thirds do you see flames? Do you see damage?
I would say middle of the second building and the top fourth of the first building.
Okay, Teresa, stay with us. We're going to look for that tape one more time.
Okay.
We're going to re-rack the tape here and see if we can't see a plane. Yeah, we see it right now. We see a plane right now coming in and impacting on what would appear to be the north side of that tower, of the westernmost tower, and hitting about 10 to 15 stories below. Teresa, let me ask you to hang on with us for a second while I talk with another gentleman who is an eyewitness, Richard Davis. Mr. Davis, good morning.
Good morning.
This is Bryant Gumbel.
Yes, sir.
I'm at 59th and 5th. Where are you?
I'm at 50th and 5th, but I'm facing south on the 39th floor.
You're facing south, so you have a clear vantage point.
Yes.
Talk to me about what you see, if you could.
The first plane looked like a 737. It flew right up the middle of Manhattan. It was clearly too low. I noticed it by the time it was passing the Empire State Building, and noticed that it was too low. It appeared to be absolutely nothing wrong with the plane, and then it very deliberately flew into the side of the World Trade Center.
Why do you say very deliberately?
Because the pilot aimed right for the building, and there was nothing wrong with the plane.
The plane did not appear to be in any trouble whatsoever?
None whatsoever.
And we're talking about a commercial aircraft, a 737?
It appeared to be a 737. I can't be absolutely certain.
No, obviously, I'm not asking you to be an aviation expert, but clearly what you saw, or what you say you saw, was not a small aircraft.
It was not a small aircraft. It was a small commercial aircraft, like a small Airbus or a 737 Boeing.
And that was the first
Two-engine
plane?
jet.
Did you see? We're Mr. Davis. We're looking at a tape replay of the second plane boring into the building. Hard for us to tell exactly how large an aircraft it is there, or whether or not that was intentional. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Believe me, it was intentional. We saw the second one come up the Hudson and veer into the second building.
Why do you say the second was intentional?
Because it was flown very deliberately. There appeared to be nothing wrong with the aircraft. It was flown very deliberately into the building.
Have they? You don't. Obviously, you're at 50th. You don't have any vantage point down there. What's everybody else talking about there who has the same vantage point? They see all the same thing you did?
Yes. Well, others did not see the first one, but there were several people in my office when the second one came in.
Yeah, we're looking at the second one boring in right now, and it does not seem to be wavering in any way or seem to be banking to avoid the tower in any way.
Let us say it could hardly be a coincidence that two airplanes fly into the World Trade Center within minutes of each other.
Yeah.
On a clear day.
Yeah. It's a terrible scene right now.
Yes, the towers look terrible.
Wow. Wow. Miss Renault, are you still on with me? Teresa Renault?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. Can you tell us if the scene has changed from your vantage point?
I would say from my vantage point right now, it's looks like there are very few flames coming out of the first tower. Still a lot of smoke. The second tower, we can still see flames coming out of the window, the north window, and a lot of smoke. A lot of smoke. The tops of the building are covered in smoke.
And from your vantage point, you can't see anything of what's happening on the ground?
No, I cannot. I hear a lot of sirens out on the street right now. One thing that you can see in the windows is all of the emergency system lights. That was one thing we could see. All of them were blinking off and on in the first tower when that happened, and I can't see them anymore. The second tower, I cannot see any emergency lights in the building blinking.
All right, I'm going to thank you both right there and pass along the word that we are getting from the FBI, that at this point the FBI is trying to confirm that this was an intentional act. At this point, it's pure speculation. Mr. Davis has told us of what he saw, and that it appeared the first plane, a large aircraft, bored into the westernmost of the two towers in intentional fashion. While we were speaking moments ago, a second plane, hard to identify the size of it, bored its way into the easternmost tower. So we have two crashes. Here's a different angle of the same plane. You see it off there on the left. Boring into there. But again, at this point, it is restricted airspace. It is a clear day, so the suspicions are high that these are intentional acts. But the FBI at this point is still trying to confirm that these are intentional acts. We have another eyewitness on the phone. Sir, good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Gumbel.
How are you?
I'm fairly frightened, I have to say.
Give me your name, if you would.
My name is Frederick Schneider, sir.
Mr. Schneider, where are you?
I am on Liberty Street, which is the same street that the Trade Center's on. I'm on the south side, and the Trade Center's on the north side. My office is on the 24th floor, so I have a very clear view of exactly what happened this morning, and I've been here for about 2 hours, so I've been watching it unfold.
2 hours?
Yes, I got to my office at 7 this morning.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Tell me about the timetable of when things started to go terribly bad this morning.
Well, Mr. Gumbel, at about 8:50 this morning, there was an explosion. I heard it first, and then my building, which is 51 stories tall, shook and rocked. And then I saw a plume of flame shoot out of the Trade Center over the Hudson River, and then I saw the plane that had crashed into the Trade Center fall down, and then it disappeared behind a building that blocks my view. There was a tremendous amount of smoke, and then it started to rain huge pieces of paper, and the paper continued to come down. At that point, all the news media started to learn about it, and I turned on my radio, and while I was still sitting at my desk, I saw a second jet, fairly large plane, fly in over the south end of Manhattan and deliberately fly directly into the Trade Center before my eyes.
Why do you say deliberately fly into the Trade Center?
Because there was no doubt in my mind that both planes were using the Trade Center as a target. They weren't in trouble. They weren't in distress. They weren't falling from the sky. They aimed for it. And they did a very good job. The Trade Center is torn open. There's a hole in the south side of the Trade Center, torn open from the impact of the plane, which fell into the street below.
Would that be the westernmost of the two towers?
The southernmost of the two towers.
Southernmost of the two towers.
Yes. It's a big gaping hole in it. Flames and smoke have been pouring out since it happened about 5 minutes ago. I'm a little shaken because I saw the plane pass before my eyes. It was just about at my eye level. So.
How close to you?
A block and a half.
You say you saw the first plane fall down.
Yeah.
We're re-racking tape here, by the way, and I'm speaking to you, Mr. Schneider, but I'm showing tape right here of the second plane boring into the northernmost of the two towers. You say you saw the first plane fall down. What can you tell me about that plane?
Well, I didn't recognize it as a plane at first. It looked to me like a charred piece of metal, and I had thought that there was an explosion from within the Trade Center, so I thought what I was seeing was a piece of the Trade Center falling because the sheath of the Trade Center is metal. But since I've learned that the first explosion was caused by a plane crashing into the tower, I've assumed that what I saw was a piece of fuselage that was falling, and the plume of flame I saw shoot out would be consistent with jet fuel exploding.
So you really have no idea of how large a plane the first one was?
No, I didn't even know that was a plane. I learned that from the news media. But I definitely saw the second plane. I heard it sound, and I saw it streaming in from the south. I watched it crash into the Trade Center.
You said you're very afraid, and understandably so. They're not evacuating your building?
No. I'm going to leave on my own, but I haven't heard any decisions made to that effect.
Can you see the ground from your vantage point?
Oh, yes.
Talk to me about the scene on the ground, if you would.
Well, it's completely devoid of vehicles and people. The entire street is totally littered with paper and smoke, and several vehicles are on fire on Liberty Street in the parking lot where either fuel or pieces of the plane fell onto them after crashing into the Trade Center.
But
there's a tremendous number of emergency vehicles here and continuing to arrive. I hear sirens from every side.
All right, Mr. Schneider, you've got a great vantage point. I'm going to ask you to hold on with me for a little while, if you would.
Okay, Mr. Gunn.
I know you're anxious to get out of the building. I'm not going to keep you forever, I promise.
Okay.
But let me ask you to sit tight for a second while I go to Washington, where Jim Stewart is standing by. He's got some official reaction. Jim, good morning. What are you hearing?
Good morning, Brian. Well, as by happenstance, I was talking to FBI headquarters at the moment this explosion took place. They saw it occur as we saw it occur, the second explosion, rather, and their reaction was the same as everyone else. Number one, they noticed the clear weather there. Number two, they noticed what appeared to be, in their eyes, a deliberate attempt to crash the aircraft into the World Trade Center. Right now, they are trying to determine whether, in fact, it was deliberate. They have no information they can share at the moment, and I get the sense that they're in the same mode that we are, simply their mouth is agape trying to figure out what's going on.
Jim, let me interrupt for just 1 second. I'm looking at a report that the FBI is investigating reports of a plane hijacking. Did you have any news of that?
No, we don't.
No confirmation of that whatsoever?
We have no confirmation
Is anybody
of
even
that.
there discussing that?
No, the only discussion that's been going on here, Brian, is that the World Trade Center has obvious symbolic value. It's been a target before of terrorism, and frankly, it would not surprise the FBI or anyone in national security if it was a target again.
Sometimes the obvious leads you to a conclusion. We're looking at two crashes, 18 minutes apart, into an obvious target, a building that has never been hit with a plane before on a clear day. What do the intelligence people there say about that?
The intelligence community for some time has been warning in a steady drumbeat, Brian, that Osama bin Laden has not been heard from now, frankly, since the beginning of the year, the USS Cole incident, rather, and they've been wondering when and if he will strike again, and they only believed it was a matter of time. And I believe that today that is going to be their first suspicion. But we have no confirmation of that. I must underline, there's no confirmation that this is a terrorist attack, number one, or number two, that it's Osama bin Laden involvement. But I can tell you right now, that is what they are thinking. That is the working premise, and we'll just have to see as the day unfolds what they discover.
Jim, as we sit here at 9:17, does the FBI have any choice but to sit and watch this on television?
I have never heard such a gasp of astonishment as I heard speaking to the FBI headquarters this morning when they saw what we saw, the explosion at the World Trade Center, the second explosion, and the smoke coming out of it. It reminded me and them of Oklahoma City. There's pure astonishment, I can tell you, at FBI headquarters this morning, and they are trying to find out the facts just as we are. Right now, they don't have any.
And as you noted, Jim, this has been a target before. Back on February 26, 93, a terrorist act at the World Trade Center killed 6 and injured more than 1,000 others. Do you know whether or not the FBI had received any warnings about attacks on domestic soil?
You know, frankly, no, and it's a question that we ask every day. I asked as recently as yesterday of the intelligence community what was the latest on terrorism threats in the United States, whether any intercepts had been picked up, whether there was any current fear here that the next target would be within the United States. The answer came back no. They were still anticipating that the next strike against American interests would be overseas somewhere. Those are the most vulnerable targets. Today would clearly be some evidence that that's not the case at all. In clear weather, as you pointed out, what appears to be a deliberate attack into the heart of the financial district in New York City. You can't pick a more explicit message to send to America if you're a terrorist than what happened today. I stress again, though, this is pure speculation, but it is speculation right now by the people who are going to have to solve this crime, if in fact it is one, Brian.
That's a good point, Jim. At this point, it is pure speculation. The only thing we can tell you is we are looking at a very clear day in Manhattan on this Tuesday morning. We are looking at 2 towers of 110 stories in height that are on fire right now, that have absorbed 2 impacts with 18 minutes apart. Certainly, it's a little more than it would be an amazing coincidence, I think we should say.
Bryant,
go ahead.
We've just been told that, and this should not be come as a surprise, it's standard procedure by the FBI. Their rapid deployment team from the Washington field office, this is a group of people that they send to major disaster and terrorist incidents, such as the twin embassy bombings in Africa. They have now been dispatched to New York. I have reason to believe, too, that some members of the HRT, that's the hostage rescue team, have been put on alert. We don't have any word yet that they would be sent. And these are standard procedures that would take place anytime a major terrorist incident occurs. But this would be a group of approximately 60 experts, people who are very good at picking up the bits of debris that we've been talking about falling on the streets of New York and turning that into evidence should they discover that this, in fact, was a deliberate act.
Jim, and if you don't know the answer to this, I understand, so I apologize up front for asking you. But do you know whether or not there are any federal offices in the World Trade Center at the upper levels?
I don't know that there are. I do not believe that there are. I believe that the FBI and the ATF, the alcohol, tobacco, and firearms people are all closer to Midtown, but I don't know the precise answer to that.
So, in fact, if the buildings were targeted intentionally, this would be more symbolic than a direct attack on the federal government or its employees. Jim, let me ask you to sit tight for a second. I understand, Mr. Davis, you're back with me on the line?
I am.
And Miss Renault, you're also back on the line?
Sure.
Mr. Davis, bring us up to speed. What are you seeing? Anything changed?
No, but the smoke is getting thicker, and I can see flames from some of the windows on the first tower. My view of the second tower is somewhat obstructed.
Where are you, 50th and 5th?
I'm 50th and 5th.
Yeah. The officials there are anxious to in any way evacuate your building? Or is this just a normal work day?
I've been told that Rockefeller Center is putting into effect security measures, but we have not been told to evacuate.
Okay. And Miss Renault, what are you seeing right now?
From the southeast tower, there are still flames coming out of the north side of the building. It may be just my perspective, but it looks like something could be sticking out of that. Also, it looks like on the northwest tower that there's possibly, the fire and everything could have moved up because it seems to be that there's smoke coming out higher floors on the building.
You say there appears to be something out. That would be the second aircraft?
Yes.
The one at the lower level?
Yes.
And what actually do you see?
There's an object that doesn't fit with the line of the building that seems to be protruding, and that's what's on fire.
We're getting a look at the building right now, and I must say the smoke seems to be obscuring our view enough so that we can't identify it. We're re-racking the tape right now. You see encircled there off on the right-hand side of your screen, this is the second plane. Obviously, the first plane has already collided with the top of the southernmost building, and now here comes the second plane. And you see making no moves to evade the second tower, and then crashing into the second one. Ms. Renault, let me ask you to sit tight. Mr. Davis, you too, for a second. I want to go to Washington, where White House correspondent Bill Plant is standing by. Bill, what are you hearing on your end?
Brian, we're hearing that the president will have a statement to make shortly. He is in Florida this morning. He was supposed to do an educational event with children to push his education bill. We understand that that event has been canceled. There was a senior staff meeting here this morning. Nobody seems quite to know exactly what's going on. The National Security Council said earlier that it had heard nothing unusual. This was after the first airplane impact. We will hear from the president, we think, very shortly, to hear what he has to say and see what, if anything, they know about this, which appears to be so deliberate.
Bill, I asked Jim this earlier, and again, I apologize if you're not in a position to shed any more light on it, but do you know whether or not officials there at the White House had been forewarned that there was an imminent attack or there was a heightened sense of alert? We're aware there had been for some time a heightened sense of alert throughout the Mideast, but I'm talking about domestically.
Well, we do know that there has been a heightened sense of alert. We do know that there have been a number of threats. There are always threats received. They have tended to take them recently a bit more seriously. But it does not appear, and I hesitate to make this for certain, but it does not appear that they had any advance warning that anything was going to happen today.
Again, this is all speculative, Bill, but are officials there working on the assumption that two planes crashing in the Twin Towers 18 minutes apart on a clear day, not an accident?
Hard to believe that they would think otherwise, but at the moment they seem just as mystified as we are. And as I said before, we do expect a statement from the president, who is down in Florida, sometime within the next few minutes.
All right, Bill, let me go back to Teresa Renault. Ms. Renault, I'm sorry I'd cut you off earlier, and I may again, by the way, if the president is ready to speak, but give us what you see from your vantage point again, if you would.
From the southeast building.
You're in Chelsea, correct?
Yes, I am. On the 14th floor, we have a 360-degree view. It's completely clear, straight shot. We have on the southeast building on the north side, looks like the north corner, about the middle of the building. It is still very much in flames and smoke rising from that. I can't see as many flames coming out of the northwest building. It looks like, though, that the north side of the building and the west side of the northwest building have been opened up and still very much covered in smoke in the tops of the buildings.
And that the northwest side would be the building that absorbed the first impact,
That's
the higher of the two.
That's correct.
From our vantage point, it appears that the higher hole is a larger hole. Is that what you see?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And, I don't know if that's just a difference in perspective from where I am, because that is the closer building
Certainly
to me.
It's staggered. You're correct.
Yes.
But we had heard an earlier report, unconfirmed, that the first plane appeared to be a 737. The plane we saw, absent any perspective, seemed to be a smaller plane.
I would say the explosion upon impact was much larger on the first hit than the second.
You heard both?
Yes, I saw the impact on the second building. I saw the explosion come from the building on the first one. Mm-hmm.
You're at Chelsea and 14th.
Yes. It's like a 16th and 8th Avenue.
Yeah, I'm sorry, on the 14th floor. I apologize.
Yes,
not on 14th. You're a considerable ways away. Any effort there to evacuate your building?
Not at this point. No.
Mr. Davis, tell us the mood where you are. We were talking to a gentleman earlier who was in a high-rise closer to the World Trade Center, and he was genuinely afraid, and understandably so.
Well, it is shocking. Very shocking to have witnessed. Perhaps we can be somewhat more sympathetic to what Israel is suffering at the moment.
But they have not moved people out of your building?
No.
You said you're at Rockefeller Center, that security actions have been put into place. What do those entail?
I really do not know, but we have not been told to evacuate.
All right. Jim Stewart, back in Washington, you still with us? Oh, Bill, you're still with us, right?
I am, Brian.
What word are you hearing on when the president's going to come forward?
We were just told that the president will have something to say down in Florida any minute. He is in Florida. We believe that his education event, which was scheduled for this morning, has been canceled. But the White House is saying that the president will have something to say. Then he'll leave Florida and come right back to Washington, Brian.
Bill, had his people, Condi Rice, Colin Powell, his security people, his foreign affairs people, ever discussed this kind of a scenario?
I don't know for certain, but I would be very surprised if they had not talked about it. This kind of what-if disaster planning is a staple in Washington, and particularly at senior levels. And I think that these sorts of things are gamed, examined, and talked about, and everyone hopes they will never happen.
Yeah, unfortunately, in this case, it would seem to have gone against hopes. Again, let's bring everyone up to speed. As best we can tell, wow, we just had another view of the second plane going in. As best we can tell, at 8:45 this morning, an aircraft plowed into the uppermost levels of one of the Twin Towers. An eyewitness has defined that plane, has told us that plane was a 737, but that is unconfirmed. And then moments later, 18 minutes later, a second aircraft, the one you saw just there, plowed into the other Twin Tower at a lower level. That plane, we have no idea of its size. We have no idea if these were intentional acts. We have no idea if these are private planes or commercial aircraft. We have an unconfirmed report from the Associated Press that the FBI was investigating reports of a plane hijacking shortly before the crash into the World Trade Center. Let's go to Florida. President Bush has a statement.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is a difficult moment for America. I unfortunately will be going back to Washington after my remarks. Secretary of Rod Page and Lieutenant Governor will take the podium and discuss education. I do want to thank the folks here at Booker Elementary School for their hospitality. Today we've had a national tragedy. Two airplanes have crashed into the World Trade Center in an apparent terrorist attack on our country. I have spoken to the Vice President, to the Governor of New York, to the Director of the FBI, and have ordered that the full resources of the federal government go to help the victims and their families, and to conduct a full-scale investigation to hunt down and to find those folks who committed this act. Terrorism against our nation will not stand. And now, if you join me in a moment of silence. May God bless the victims, their families, and America. Thank you very much.
We've been watching President Bush, who was down in Florida for what was supposed to be an educational event. Instead, he is racing back to Washington as we speak. The president making a very brief statement in Sarasota, calling it an apparent terrorist attack on our nation. Again, that is unconfirmed, and promising the full resources of the federal government to not only help the victims, but also to investigate. And before asking people to pray with him, the president's saying that this act will not stand. As he was speaking, we got a report from Reuters that a plane was hijacked from Boston. A plane out of Boston was hijacked. But again, that is unconfirmed. We had a report earlier from the Associated Press that there had been a hijacking. Now Reuters is reporting that a plane out of Boston was hijacked. An American Airlines aircraft, we understand, was the plane that was hijacked. This would be in keeping with an earlier eyewitness report that the first plane that plowed into the World Trade Center was a 737. Former FBI agent James Kallstrom covered the World Trade Center bombing back in 1993. He is with us on the line right now. Jim, good morning.
Good morning.
You've been watching this. Talk to me.
I shouldn't say good morning. It's not a good morning.
No, I apologize. Go ahead.
I don't really know much about it, but it sure looks to me like a deliberate act of terrorism. And I mourn the loss of the lives that I'm sure are going to follow this.
I've got a lot of questions for you, James. Let me kind of take you through them if I could. Because you investigated and worked on the original terrorist incident, I should say the terrorist incident back in 1993, can you tell me if these buildings have any special significance by virtue of who's working in them?
Well, I don't think it's so much who's working them. I think the towers symbolize largely. There's many other symbols also, but the World Trade Center is a symbol. That was one of the original reasons that Ramzi Youssef and the rest of that gang wanted to do the World Trade Center as a symbol of America. So, sure, there's other symbols, but I think this is probably the tallest one on the East Coast.
Again, all of this is unconfirmed. We heard the president call it an apparent terrorist attack. At this moment, have you any doubt that's exactly what it is?
No, I have no doubt of that. I would call it an apparent attack. I think there's probably an infinitesimal chance it isn't, but it certainly doesn't appear that it could be. Commercial airliners, number one, are not going to direct themselves into a square hit on the World Trade Center. If there's some sort of a mayday or something wrong with the plane, they're going to try to ditch it elsewhere. They're not going to do that. And if the reports of a second plane hitting the building are true, then I think that probably caps off exactly what this is. It's a cowardly act of terrorism.
How restricted is the airspace around the World Trade Center?
I'm not an FAA person, but no, you cannot fly through that airspace unless you're a helicopter, or unless you're anything really, without being guided by air traffic control. It's highly restrictive.
So the possibility that two planes on a clear day just happened to wander into these buildings.
I think that's beyond the pale.
Yeah, that's not a possibility. Again, you worked on evacuating these buildings. You saw what happened when they were evacuated. How many people are we talking about from what you can see on those upper levels?
Do we know exactly what time this first event happened?
We're guessing. We're putting it at about 8:45, Mr. Kallstrom.
Yeah,
again, that's only by eyewitnesses.
Yeah, Brian, I think we're talking literally hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of people affected by this. I mean, the smoke alone in the other floors, and the when you compare the bombing in the basement of that building, which for a number of hours we weren't sure it was a bomb. We thought maybe it was some sort of a transformer blowing up, to what's reported at least as a 737 type size airplane, something that size, hitting the first tower, and then some smaller plane hitting the second. I mean, this is geometrically more catastrophic.
Difficult building to extraordinary, obviously, because of the height of the buildings. But the plans in place for evacuation, are they, from your experience, state of the art?
I think they are. I think the whole security of that building, both from a physical security standpoint and from an evacuation standpoint, was certainly reinvented and looked after after that tragedy that happened back in the early 90s. And they're probably as good as they can be. But having said that, you're talking about one of the tallest structures, or two of the tallest structures in the United States. And whether or not the elevators are working, they're probably not. They're not used in case of fire. You've got a massive evacuation problem on your hands. Would it
be highly unusual, Mr. Kallstrom, for these attacks, if that's what they were, to have taken place without some degree of advance warning?
Well, I don't know the answer to that. Obviously, the FBI and law enforcement, the people that come to work every day and suffer through immense criticism when little things go wrong, these are the days that everyone hopes that they have a very formidable, highly motivated FBI and law enforcement team. And I suspect we do, And these are the things that they try to not have happen. These are the things they try to have the intelligence to avoid happening. International terrorism, if that is what this is, and I don't know what it is very hard to penetrate because it's not very, it doesn't have a hierarchy of authority, and it's cellular, and it's a lot of different people motivated for religious type reasons, hatred reasons, and you can necessarily not know a lot about what's going on in an agency if you're in at some level because it's so segmented.
Again, I'm getting a report now that it was a United Airlines plane that plowed into the building. We don't know whether that negates the American Airlines reported hijacking or whether or not that was a second plane. So at this point, we're getting different reports. Go ahead, Mr. Kelso.
Yeah, I mean, you telling me that, Brian, if that is a commercial airline, a United or American or whatever it is, you know, that, I mean, my initial thought there is that this plane was somehow commandeered by somebody, hijacked, taken over, and flown into the building. I don't know that for a fact, but that's certainly what it looks like.
Yeah, as I'm looking at the second tape right here, and I don't know if you're watching on the line with us, that is definitely a commercial-sized aircraft.
Yeah.
Now that we've blown it up.
Yeah.
In size.
You know, it's beyond belief, but it's not beyond belief. I mean, we've seen this hatred find its way into the embassy bombings in Africa. We've seen this hatred at the USS Cole. We've seen it at the World Trade Center in '93. We've seen it around the world in acts that take place almost every day. And, you know, for this to then transform itself into this size of an incredible tragedy, to me, although I certainly would never expect it, never ever want it to happen, is not that unbelievable.
Yeah, James Kallstrom, let me ask you to sit tight for a second, if you would. Brian Jenkins, a terrorism expert who's been with us quite a few times, as I understand, on the line. Brian, you there?
Yes, I am.
Talk to me.
Well, obviously, you know, we don't know the details of what happened yet. We should have details coming out fairly quickly, though, as to the identity of this aircraft. We're talking about crowded airspace in New York with major airports in the area, both in the immediate area of New York and in the surrounding cities. There should be information fairly quickly that will identify these particular aircraft. And indeed, we should be able to confirm fairly quickly as to the identity of the jet, and perhaps even some last second broadcast that may indicate what happened.
Mr. Jenkins, I'm going to interrupt for just one second because we're getting word that they are evacuating the White House down in Washington right now.
Well, this is not surprising. I mean, first of all, an action of this magnitude is something that does suggest a great deal of planning and preparation. In some of these recent actions, we have seen multiple coordinated operations.
But who's capable of this kind of planning and preparation?
There are a number of terrorist organizations around the world that would be capable of this, based primarily in the Middle East. But it's too early, really, to speculate as to the identity. Certainly,
but is there any doubt in your mind that what we're looking at here is the aftermath of a coordinated terrorist incident?
You know, to explain. In any as happenstance.
Hold it, Mr. Jenkins. We're looking. There are two jets right now approaching the World Trade Center. Oh. We're watching. Hold on. I'm sorry. No, the one aircraft is cleared. We can't tell whether it was a plane or a chopper from our vantage point. I apologize, Mr. Jenkins.
No, that's okay.
We're more than a bit gun shy. We're seeing aircraft off to the right side of our picture. We're going to assume at this point that is a copter or is aircraft to get a better vantage point. But having seen one go plow in for a second time, we're a little bit wary. Go ahead. I apologize.
Of course, but the issue here is that the presumption has to be made that there could be yet further pieces to this operation that haven't yet unfolded. While this itself is certainly one of the most ambitious terrorist attacks that we have seen, certainly, we have seen in the recent past coordinated attacks, even attacks taking place in different cities within minutes.
Let me
of
ask you to sit there. James Kallstrom, you still with me?
Be with you for another minute or so, Brian.
Okay. The White House has been evacuated. Is that action that's normally taken as precautionary an attack like this, or is that in direct response, you would think, to a specific threat?
Brian, I would say none of this is normal.
No, you know what I meant.
And I think probably just knowing the little bit that I know, sitting outside now and seeing what's happened here, I think that's probably very prudent.
I'm looking, Mr. Kallstrom and Mr. Jenkins, I'll tell you as we alert everyone else, that I'm looking at a report here from Reuters that a Palestinian group has claimed responsibility. Oh my goodness, oh my goodness. We're looking at a live picture from Washington, and there is smoke pouring out of the Pentagon. It would appear that there has been another major explosion, this one in the nation's capital. You are looking at a scene of apparent blast aftermath. There is smoke in the air over the Pentagon. We don't know whether this is the result of a bomb or whether it is yet another aircraft that has targeted a symbol of the United States power, but there is smoke pouring out of the Pentagon. This is coming at 9:43 Eastern Time. And we understand that there's a bomb at a heliport being reported. As I note all this, there is a report that I'm looking at from Reuters that a Palestinian group has claimed responsibility for the New York World Trade Center plane attacks. Abu Dhabi Television is reporting that it received a call from the Democratic Front for the Liberation of Palestine, claiming responsibility for crashing 2 planes into the World Trade Center buildings. And Qatar-based Al Jazeera television is saying that FBI sources are saying that one of the 2 aircraft had been hijacked. Mr. Jenkins, are you still with me? What's this Democratic Front for the Liberation of Palestine?
This is a Palestinian group whose history goes back into the late 60s. It's the Democratic Front for the Liberation of Palestine. Certainly, they have not carried out anything on this scale. No terrorist group has carried out anything on this scale, but certainly haven't carried out anything like this, terrorist activity like this in many, many years. However, I'd be very, very cautious at this point about any telephone claims. Once these events occur, what we've seen is 2 things. Number one, in many cases, there is no credible claim of responsibility from the actual perpetrators. And second, there are often many false claims by groups once information like this goes out.
Let me just pass along some information. In New York, all airports, Newark, JFK, LaGuardia, all airports have been closed, as have all tunnels leading to New Jersey and Queens, and all bridges. All airports, tunnels, and bridges have been closed. Mr. Jenkins and Mr. Kallstrom, while you're there, let me just try to do a recap, if I might, because we're looking at just about 1 hour ago when all this began. It began when a plane, still an unidentified aircraft, plowed into one of the 2 towers of the World Trade Center, creating a hole, the larger of the 2 that you see on the left-hand side of your screen. 18 minutes after that, as we were dealing with that explosion, you see a second plane, appeared to be a commercial aircraft, bored into, there it is again, bored into the second of the 2 towers at a lower level. At this point, we do not have any confirmation of casualties or injuries, or even confirmation that these planes were hijacked. Nonetheless, we do have a couple of reports, one from AP, one from Reuters, reporting that an American Airlines plane was hijacked, that a United Airlines plane was hijacked, supposedly one of those 2 planes hijacked out of Boston. Within about 45 or 50 minutes after that first attack, we saw smoke pouring out of the Pentagon in the nation's capital. There's the scene right there. Again, at this point, we don't know if that's the result of a bombing or we don't know if it's the result of a plane attack. The president right now is on his way back from Florida. He had gone there for an educational event. He came forward, had a couple of things to say to the nation. In a brief remarks, he said this was an apparent terrorist attack on our country, promised the full resources of the government to help those who were injured by the attack and to investigate the attack. He said, before leading people in prayer, that this will not stand. The president is heading back to the White House, but we can tell you at this point that the White House has been evacuated or is in the process of being evacuated. And here in New York, everybody is, of course, on full alert. All airports, tunnels, and bridges have been closed. Mr. Kallstrom, are you still with me?
Yeah, I can.
I know you've got to get out of there. Any final comments from your end?
No, just a tragic day. I agree with the comments about. I don't think we should jump to any conclusions as to who did this. I think it's largely irrelevant for the public at this point. There are a lot of false claims and misclaims and no claims and after all, this is such a massive attack that full retaliation will be in the cards. So the notion of someone standing up and saying they actually did this, I would have to put great doubt at that at this point.
Former New York FBI Director James Kallstrom. Jim, thank you.
Thank you.
We can add right now to the list of evacuated, we told you earlier the White House was in the process of or had been evacuated. We understand the same can now be said of the U.S. Capitol and the U.S. Treasury building. Brian Jenkins, are you with me?
Yes, I am.
You heard Mr. Kallstrom talking about responding to this kind of an attack, if that's what it was. That's something easily said. Is it doable?
Well, it is doable. The question is, first of all, though it's far too early to talk about what it may be possible to do in response. I mean, clearly, an action like this will provoke some type of response, but then that really requires first figuring out who did it, and then figuring out what the appropriate response is.
Can you play
So
process of elimination
it's
in answering who did it? Can you not eliminate some possibilities because they did not have the resources, the coordination, the expertise to do this?
You know, you have to be very, very careful both about jumping to conclusions as to who to blame and ruling out people prematurely. Many, many years ago, analysis of something like this used to be easier because we dealt with a number of identifiable terrorist organizations, each of which had its own identifiable capabilities and modus operandi. Today, it is a much more fluid organization. From universes of like-minded fanatics, these various conspiracies are put together. And so, in fact, if we drop back to the plot that was discovered just before the Millennium celebrations in the United States, that involved some Algerians who, in turn, are believed to have been connected to Osama bin Laden. You know, one sees these assemblies of conspiracies that may involve many actors.
Again, a further note, and we're getting this as it comes in. We understand now we're getting a report that the FAA has halted all takeoffs, all traffic nationwide, that all aircraft are grounded. Obviously, there are those aircraft in the air. If they're bound for New York, they're going to arrive and find airports closed. But whether or not those in the air are going to be brought down to the nearest facility as soon as possible is still unclear. Is there a standard procedure amid all this, Mr. Jenkins? Mr. Jenkins, you still with me? Evidently, we've lost our line to Brian Jenkins. Let's just bring you up to speed on the picture you're seeing on your screen. On the left is the World Trade Center. We have smoke billowing out of both towers. It has been for over an hour now. We also have smoke coming out of a portion of the Pentagon on the right-hand side of your screen. That has been going on for about 10 or 15 minutes. It would seem that the United States on this day is under attack from terrorists, that the first aircraft was the first blow in that attack. It was an aircraft that an eyewitness has described to us as a 737. It struck the World Trade Center at its upper levels at 8:45 or within minutes of that this morning. And then 18 minutes after that, there was this frightening scene of a second aircraft plowing into the other tower on the southern tip of Manhattan. When visibility was perfect for flying, it would seem that both aircraft were directly targeting the World Trade Center, a building that has, or a facility that was the scene of a terrorist attack back in 1993. That attack killed 6 and left over 1,000 injured. Although we have no reports of casualties, it would seem that we can expect those numbers to be much, much worse today. Shortly after that attack, the president came forward in Florida with a brief address to the nation, promising the full resources and saying this will not stand. And then he is flying back to Washington. Once he gets there, he'll find the White House, the Capitol, and the Treasury have been evacuated, is ablaze. Victimized again by yet another attack, this one in the nation's capital. That one came at about 9:30 Eastern Time. Bill Plant is standing by with us at the White House or thereabouts. Bill, where are you and what are you getting?
Hello?
Bill? Bill? Bill Plant is standing by. Let's go ahead and see if we can't get our communication through with him. We are getting a report here. I'm looking. Paul Begala, Democratic consultant to Bill Clinton, is being quoted on the wire as saying he witnessed the explosion near the Pentagon shortly after 2 planes crashed in the World Trade Center. He says it was a huge fireball, a huge orange fireball, and he says another witness told him that a helicopter exploded. He is saying that another witness told him a helicopter exploded. Let's go to Bill Plant. Bill can't hear me, but I understand we can get his audio. So let's go ahead and signal Bill to tell us what he's got.
Bill Plant in Washington. I am across the street from the White House on the other side of Lafayette Park, approximately 1 block away. They have evacuated the entire White House staff and the staff of the old executive office building next door. We understand that the Treasury is also being evacuated. There's a lot of activity, fire trucks, ambulances, but as far as we know, there is no damage in the White House complex. I repeat, no damage that we know of in the White House complex. But this was in response to damage elsewhere, to the New York aircraft incidents and to whatever it was that happened at the Pentagon. But this is a full alert. The Secret Service has moved everybody away from the White House grounds, away from the White House complex. And they keep telling us that we have to remain a block away. There are fire trucks going by, ambulances going by, headed we know not where. But this is obviously a precautionary measure because no one clearly knows what to expect next. Right?
All right, Bill Plant. And again, Bill is unable to hear us. We were able to get his audio in here, but as you can imagine, it is I'm sure a frantic scene down in the nation's capital this morning, as it is here in New York, as we've been watching down at the southern tip of Manhattan. Jane Clayson is with me here in New York, and I apologize for talking throughout, but you've been watching. Go ahead, Jane.
Well, I just wonder how many people are in the building right now. We haven't been able to assess if people have been coming out of the building, if there have been people on the ground. One man reportedly had some burns from some debris that had fallen from the building, but we still haven't been able to assess if there are injuries, or obviously there are many hundreds or if not thousands of people affected, says James Kallstrom, formerly of the FBI, but we still don't know that, and that's one looming question.
Yeah, I mean, you at this point, you hate to jump to conclusions and you don't want to throw numbers around, but if, and again, I put if in capital letters, if we are talking about 2 commercial aircraft plowing into the World Trade Center during business hours or shortly before the business day begins at 9 a.m., we are talking about some considerable numbers of dead and injured.
And not just at the World Trade Center, now at the Pentagon in Washington as well.
Also at the Pentagon. And we're looking at a list of some of the businesses on the upper levels of the World Trade Center, and none of them have any affiliation with the government. But again, the World Trade Center isn't necessarily a government building. It is there's U.S. Customs above the 70th floor, but the World Trade Center, more than anything, is a symbol of the United States, a symbol of U.S. progress, a symbol of U.S. might, located as it is down at the heart of Wall Street. And so if in fact it was targeted, it was because of its symbolic value. Producer Laura Shane was by the Pentagon when it was hit. Let's go there again. She can't hear us, but she can speak with us. Laura, somebody cue her.
Hello?
All right. Obviously, we're having problems with Laura Shane's audio. Again, at this point, we don't know whether that Pentagon explosion was the result of an aircraft crashing into it or a bomb that was deployed near there. We had an unconfirmed report that it was a helicopter that had crashed into the building. You can still see some flames down there in the lower right-hand corner. Now we are getting a report that they believe it was a plane. But again, we do not have any confirmation of that, nor do we have any idea what the numbers involved here are.
These are the first scenes from the ground, it appears.
Yeah, these are scenes from near the Pentagon in the nation's capital. We don't know how close to the Pentagon these are. Obviously, that is not the Pentagon in the background, so we're talking of a neighboring area. We're not getting any numbers at this point. We do know that an FBI team has been dispatched from the nation's capital to investigate what has gone on at the World Trade Center. But at this point, our information is sketchy. Looking at a report here now, the first plane to hit the World Trade Center was a hijacked aircraft that had taken off from Boston, supposedly an American Airlines Boeing 767 out of Logan. This is the second aircraft. We don't know whether or not this aircraft was, as earlier reported, a United Airlines aircraft. We are also getting word out of Chicago that the Sears Tower, the tallest structure in that city, has been evacuated. Before we have to step aside, as we're getting another look at the second attack, we understand a Pentagon witness is with us in Washington. Good morning. This is Bryant Gumbel in New York. Could you identify yourself, please? Hello?
Yes.
Yes, sir. Could you identify yourself for me?
Yes, my name is Jim Dorsett.
And Jim, how close are you to the Pentagon? Okay, we're obviously having some problems making that connection with the eyewitness in Washington. We have just a minute left. Let's go ahead and recount what we do know. At 8:45 Eastern Time on a clear day on the southern tip of Manhattan, not one but two aircraft plowed into the World Trade Center. We don't know at this point if they were private aircraft. We don't know if it was intentional. All we do know is that they appeared to be commercial aircraft. These come amid reports of hijacking. Shortly after that, about an hour after that, there was an explosion at the Pentagon. At this point, the Pentagon, the White House, the Capitol, and the Treasury have been evacuated in Washington. In New York, all airports, tunnels, and bridges have been closed, and in Chicago, the Sears Tower has been evacuated. We understand now there has been a secondary explosion on Tower 2. With that, we will leave you and turn it over to Dan Rather.
This is CBS News continuing live coverage of the apparent terrorist attacks today here in New York City and in Washington, D.C. It's important to say these things at the very beginning. There is much that is not known about what is happening. The second thing is that the word from almost everybody who's trying to deal with the situation, the word of the day is steady. Steady. Yes, there have been some terrible things happening, but until and unless we know the facts, it's very difficult to draw many conclusions. Now, here's what we know. Just before 9 Eastern Time this morning, a plane crashed into one of the twin towers of the World Trade Center along the Hudson River here in New York. A few minutes later, a second plane crashed into the other tower. Both skyscrapers are on fire. Evacuations have been underway for a long while. There are known injuries. How many? Much too soon to know. And whether there's any death or not, it is too soon to know. Yes, there are widespread assumptions that there must be death, but there are no confirmed fatalities. Now, in Washington, the Pentagon has had a fire and explosions, much speculation of what would have caused the fires and explosions at the Pentagon in Washington, but very few facts. David Martin, our Pentagon correspondent, says that he has seen, I believe it said 5 injured people at the Pentagon. One eyewitness, and only one so far, is quoted as saying he thinks, I put that in quotation marks, he thinks a plane crashed into the Pentagon. But there'll be rumors all day, and we're going to try to separate the rumors from the facts. Now, you're looking at a live picture of the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center, in flames, with much smoke. In the last few minutes, there have been 2 reports, but not yet officially confirmed, that a portion of at least one of the towers has collapsed. But I caution that that's an unconfirmed report, although it comes from 2 sources, and it's unclear whether that collapse is about the interior of the building or some portion of the exterior of the building. I want to emphasize again, not to be redundant, but this is a day in which rumors are going to spread like mildew in damp basements. And there'll be reports, some of them will be officially confirmed, some not. That's the environment in which we're dealing. Now, President Bush was in Florida this morning. He called this an apparent act of terrorism and rushed back to Washington. The president is in the air going back to Washington at the moment. Now, in Washington, the report spread that a plane also crashed at the Pentagon. See, as David Martin says, there are at least several injuries. Several is the word he used. The FAA has banned all aircraft takeoffs nationwide. Here in New York, the city is on a full terrorist alert. Bridges and tunnels are closed. You recall the World Trade Center was the target of a terrorist bombing in 1993. Now, again, it's important to point out that with television, what we can show you is what is at the end of the television camera. The whole city is not in smoke and flames, not by a long shot. The city is on a terrorist alert. Entry into the city has been closed off. Tunnels and bridges are closed off as a precautionary measure. But, you know, in many, many areas of New York City, life goes on this morning, and the same is true in Washington, D.C. So just keep in mind that when you see this picture constantly, it's of one section of New York City, and we go to Washington for the picture there, the Pentagon, the same thing. These pictures are not in real time. As you can see, that made it look like that the flames were spreading. This picture steadied now. For those of you familiar with the city, the World Trade Center at the end of Manhattan Island, 2 twin towers. Apparently, 2 aircraft, one hit into one of the towers and then another hit into the other tower. What kind of aircraft were they? We simply do not know what kind of planes they were. Witnesses described them as, quote, large aircraft. Yes, you may have heard reports, but the reports are unconfirmed, that there was one aircraft that had been hijacked. There continue to be reports. I'm pausing, taking in information as I speak to you. There are increasing reports that on one of the World Trade Center towers, that portions of the tower have collapsed. Now, this would not be surprising to have this proven to be true, given the smoke and flames that have been pouring out of these buildings for what now, well over an hour. I want to underscore again that both towers have been hit. Both towers, each tower was hit by an aircraft, incoming aircraft. The origin of the aircraft, what kind of planes, unknown. I was saying before there have been these reports, but the reports are unconfirmed, that an aircraft in the Eastern Air Corridor may have been hijacked this morning and may have been one of the planes that crashed in the World Trade Center. None of that is confirmed. CBS News veteran correspondent Harold Dow is on the telephone now from a section